Jai Suparikar Shri Shri Guru Gauranga Gandharvika Giridhari Shri Shri Radha Govinda Jiu Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Vinod Bihari Jiu Ki Jai Jai Shri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Sudarshan Chakra Jiu Ki Jai Jai Shri Shri Nitai Gauranga Ki Jai Shri Nrsimha Bhagavan Ki Jai Jai Nityalila Pravishta Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Statarasata Sri Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Jai Nityalila Pravishta Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Astatarasata Sri Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai Nityalila Pravishta Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Ashtatarasata Shri Srimad Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai Jai Shri Rupa Nuga Guru Varga Ki Jai Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Samagata Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Srimad Bhagavad-gītā Ki Jai Srimad Bhagavad-gītā Ki Jai Shri Krishna Chandra Ki Jai Bhagavan Shri Krishna Chandra Ki Jai Shri Arjuna Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Samagata Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Nitai Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Gaur Gurave Gauda Chandraya Radhikaya Tadalaye Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tadabhaktaya Namo Namaha Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunamilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukam karoti vachalam pangam langayate girim Yat kripa tamaham bande Shri Guru Dinataranam Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha Patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahabhadanaya Krishna Prema Vridayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namni Gaura Tishe Namaha Nityanandam Namastubhyam Premananda Pradayane Kalo Kalamashanashaya Janavapataye Namah Pajanulambita Pujo Kanakavadato Samkirtanaika Pitaro Kamalaya Taksho Vishvambaro Dvijavaro Jugadharma Palo Bande Jagat Priyakaro Karunavataro Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhaktarupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakta Shaktikam He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatapate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Yatam suruto pangor mama mandamater gati Matsarvasva padambojo Radha madana mohano Divyad vrindaranya kalpadrumadha Srimad Ratanagar Sinhasanasto Srimad Radha Srila Govinda Devo Preshtalibhi Sevyamano Smarami Srimad Rasarasaram Bhivam Shivata Tatakstitaha Karshana Venus Vanair Gopir Gopinata Shriyestunaha Brindai Tulsidebai Priyai Keshavasya Krishna Bhakti Prade Devi Satyavachai Namo Namaha Bhaktya Vihina Aparadha Lakshai Kshiptascha Kamari Taranga Madhye Kripa Maitvam Sharanam Prapanna Vrinde Namaste Charanarvindam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. First of all, I'm offering my unlimited Dandavat pranams and my Shraddha Pushpanjali at the lotus feet of my most worshipable beloved Gurudev, Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnupad, Paramahansa Astatarasata Sri Srila, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada. Then I'm offering my same unlimited Dandavat pranams and my Shraddha Pushpanjali at the lotus feet of my most worshipable beloved Siksha Gurudevs, Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnupad, Paramahansa Astatarasata, Sri Srila Bhakti Rakshak, Sridhar Goswami Maharaj. And Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnupad, Paramahansa Astatarasata, Sri Srila Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj. I'm offering my Dandavat pranams to the lotus feet of all of my Sri Rupanuga Guru Varga, to the six Goswami, Sri Rup Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath, Sri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasa Raghunath, and to all of the Vaishnavas and all of the Vaishnavis. And especially this is the third day of our festival, the Gita Jayanti festival. I think we have to make this a regular part of our transcendental festival year. So the third day, it was mentioned on our calendar or on the flyer that was printed, that we wanted to reflect upon what we experienced during this 3-day festival, and especially yesterday, the second day, in which we all sat together. A good number of devotees stayed the whole day in either the temple room or just on the side here, but they participated in the transcendental chanting of Bhagavan Sri Krishna Chandra's song of the Supreme Lord, Bhagavan. And we read from our beloved Srila Prabhupada's version of the Bhagavad-gītā, as he titled it, as it is. Big reason for titling it Bhagavad-gītā as it is. And he explains that himself in the introduction. Because when he first came to America, there were a few individuals who were coming to his classes. You can actually hear the recordings when he didn't have his own place, except there was a rented room in an office building not far from Dr. Mishra's apartment. And Prabhupada would walk back and forth. But you can hear his classes that he recorded himself on his TR. He called it in his diary, his tape recorder. Someone had donated. So luckily we have some of those early classes, and you can hear how urgent is his voice, and also how he's kind of testing the waters with the people who had come to him. So Prabhupada told in his introduction, actually I'll read it, his words that he told, why he made this Bhagavad-gītā. So, this is in his preface. He says, originally, probably blinding all of you, right? Originally, I wrote Bhagavad-gītā as it is, in the form in which it is presented now. When this book was first published, the original manuscript was, unfortunately, cut short to less than 400 pages, without illustrations and without explanations for most of the original verses of the Srimad Bhagavad-gītā. In all of my other books, Srimad Bhagavatam, Sri Ishopanishad, etc., the system is that I give the original verse, its English transliteration, word for word, Sanskrit to English equivalents, translations, and purports. This makes the book very authentic and scholarly, and it makes the meaning self-evident. I was not very happy, therefore, when I had to minimize my original manuscript. But later on, when the demand for Bhagavad-gītā as it is considerably increased, I was requested by many scholars and devotees to present the book in its original form, and Messrs., I don't know what that stands for, MESSRS dot, Messrs., Macmillan and Company, agreed to publish the complete edition. And thus the present attempt is to offer the original manuscript of this great book of knowledge with full parampara explanation in order to establish the Krishna consciousness movement more soundly and progressively. Our Krishna consciousness movement is genuine, historically authorized, natural, and transcendental, due to its being based on Bhagavad-gītā as it is. It is gradually becoming the most popular movement in the entire world, especially amongst the younger generation. It is becoming more and more interesting to the older generation also. Older gentlemen are becoming interested, so much so that the fathers and grandfathers of my disciples are encouraging us by becoming life members of our great society, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. In Los Angeles, many fathers and mothers used to come to see me to express their feelings of gratitude for my leading the Krishna consciousness movement throughout the entire world. Some of them said that it is greatly fortunate for the Americans that I have started the Krishna consciousness movement in America. But actually, the original father of this movement is Lord Krishna himself, since it was started a very long time ago, but is coming down to human society by disciplic succession. If I have any credit in this connection, it does not belong to me personally, but it is due to my eternal spiritual master, His Divine Grace, Om Vishnu Pad, Paramahansa Paribrajakacharya, 108, Sri Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj, Prabhupada. If I personally have any credit in this matter, it is only that I have tried to present Bhagavad-gītā as it is, without adulteration. Before my presentation of Bhagavad-gītā as it is, almost all the English editions of Bhagavad-gītā were introduced to fulfill someone's personal ambition. But our attempt in presenting Bhagavad-gītā as it is to present the mission of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. Our business is to present the will of Krishna, not that of any mundane speculator like the politician or philosopher or scientist, for they have very little knowledge of Krishna despite all their other knowledge. When Krishna says, Manmana bhava madbhakto madhyajimam namaskuru, etc., we, unlike the so-called scholars, do not say that Krishna and his inner spirit are different. Krishna is absolute, and there is no difference between Krishna's name, Krishna's form, Krishna's quality, Krishna's pastimes, etc. This absolute position of Krishna is difficult to understand for any person who is not a devotee of Krishna in the parampara disciplic succession system. Generally, the so-called scholars, politicians, philosophers, and swamis, so-called, without perfect knowledge of Krishna, they try to banish or kill Krishna when writing commentary on Bhagavad-gītā. Such unauthorized commentary upon Bhagavad-gītā is known as Mayavadi Bhashya, and Lord Chaitanya has warned us about these unauthorized men. Lord Chaitanya clearly says that anyone who tries to understand Bhagavad-gītā from the Mayavadi point of view will commit a great blunder. The result of such a blunder will be that the misguided student of Bhagavad-gītā will certainly be bewildered on the path of spiritual guidance and will not be able to go back home, back to Godhead. Our only purpose is to present the Bhagavad-gītā as it is in order to guide the conditioned student to the same purpose for which Krishna descends to this planet once in a day of Brahma, or every 8,600,000,000 years. This purpose is stated in Bhagavad-gītā, and we have to accept it as it is. Otherwise, there is no point in trying to understand the Bhagavad-gītā and its speaker, Lord Krishna. Lord Krishna first spoke Bhagavad-gītā to the sun god some hundreds of millions of years ago. We have to accept this fact and thus understand the historical significance of Bhagavad-gītā without misinterpretation, on the authority of Krishna. To interpret Bhagavad-gītā without any reference to the will of Krishna is the greatest offense. In order to save oneself from this offense, one has to understand the Lord as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as he was directly understood by Arjuna, Lord Krishna's first disciple. Such understanding of Bhagavad-gītā is really profitable and authorized for the welfare of human society in fulfilling the mission of life. The Krishna consciousness movement is essential in human society, for it offers the highest perfection of life. How this is so is explained fully in the Bhagavad-gītā. Unfortunately, mundane wranglers have taken advantage of Bhagavad-gītā to push forward their demonic propensities and mislead people regarding right understanding of the simple principles of life. Everyone should know how God or Krishna is great, and everyone should know the factual position of the living entities. Everyone should know that a living entity is eternally a servant, and that unless one serves Krishna, one has to serve illusion in different varieties of the three modes of material nature, and thus perpetually one has to wander within the cycle of birth and death. Even the so-called liberated Mayavadi speculator has to undergo this process. This knowledge constitutes a great science, and each and every living being has to hear it for his own interest. People in general, especially in this age of Kali, are enamored by the external energy of Krishna, and they wrongly think that by advancement of material comforts, every man will be happy. They have no knowledge that the material or the external nature is very strong, for everyone is strongly bound by the stringent laws of material nature. A living entity is happily the part and parcel of the Lord, and thus his natural function is to render immediate service to the Lord. By the spell of illusion, one tries to be happy by serving his personal sense gratification in different forms which will never make him happy. Instead of satisfying his own personal material senses, he has to satisfy the senses of the Lord. That is the highest perfection of life. The Lord wants this, and he demands it. One has to understand this central point of Bhagavad-gītā. Our Krishna consciousness movement is teaching the whole world this central point. And because we are not polluting the theme of Bhagavad-gītā as it is, anyone seriously interested in deriving benefit by studying the Bhagavad-gītā must take help from the Krishna consciousness movement for practical understanding of Bhagavad-gītā under the direct guidance of the Lord. We hope, therefore, that people will derive the greatest benefit by studying Bhagavad-gītā as it is, as we have presented it here, And if even one man becomes a pure devotee of the Lord, we shall consider our attempt a success. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, 12th of May, 1971, Sydney, Australia. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srimad Bhagavad-gītā ki jai. Actually, yeah, Prabhupada.
71.
71.
50 years. So that's when the full edition got published. Before that, there was a shorter version. So, right?
You know, what I remember is that we actually did not have, because I joined in 1970, right? And at that time, for the whole year, we only had that little Macmillan purple cover, you know. That's the only one we had, which was the one that he just explained. Okay. He was very unhappy about.
The 400-page.
Yeah, because Macmillan published it, but they had their doubts that it would be a good seller, this and that. They didn't want to invest so much in it, and that really was not made Prabhupada unhappy. So it didn't even have the original Sanskrit.
He was forced by the publishers to shorten.
Yes,
okay.
And they cut out, I don't know, maybe 60 or 70% of all the purports. Okay. Can you imagine, you know? So Prabhupada had to accept that because that's all he could do at that time, you know? He had to go to an outside publisher. So they forced that. Now he says here that the present version, Macmillan also published, right? I'm not so sure. Because I'll tell you, frankly, we did not have this full version until about 1974. And what I have heard is that there was a contract that had to expire before we could actually print it, you know, the BBT. So until that time, they kept on reprinting. You remember that one version that was a hardcover? It was a little bit bigger size, of course. Yellow colored, and it had kind of like a ornate design around the border. No Sanskrit. See, that's what we were distributing, I remember, to colleges and universities in 1975. But the actual full version, as we see it here, it did not come out until, I think, 1974.
I bought it in a bookstore around maybe March of 74, this full
okay.
version.
Right. So, yeah. So,
but Macmillan published again, but this time Prabhupada paid for it with his own money.
Yeah, the BBT.
Oh, the BBT published it, not Macmillan?
Well, that's why I can't understand it, because, well, this is a copy, an exact copy of the original, and it does say here, Collier Books, New York, New York, Collier Macmillan Limited, London. So I don't understand, because eventually the BBT published and printed it,
okay.
You know, but perhaps it was somehow or other around that time, but yet 12th May 1971, I don't understand. We'll have to ask persons like Ramaswar or somebody like that.
What's the published date of the book?
The published date?
It should say the number of copies in the published
Yeah. Okay, copyright 1972 by Bhaktivedanta Book Trust. It doesn't say the date. First Collier Books edition 1972. Classic reprint 2001. That's another thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So 70 says 72?
Yeah.
So maybe
Copyright.
Macmillan published this for a few years and then the BBT.
But I don't remember having it. I remember in that early period of the early 70s, still not having this. But anyway, we'll have to find out.
Limited run.
Yeah, I don't know.
And they didn't have faith that it was going to sell. Small run.
Yeah, that could be. Yeah, so, and Srila Prabhupada also told, I was looking for that, but actually I thought it was in the preface, it might be in the introduction, but he was saying a lady asked me, like way back in that, when he first came, to his early classes in 1965, 66, going into the winter of 66, going into the fall of 66. Yeah, because he came in 65, and then he began living in New York, and through that winter of 65 to 66, that's when he was holding his tiny little classes. You can see in his diary, he tells the names of the people that came. Sometimes there was 2 people, 3 people, and then you can hear his recordings of what he was teaching to them. But he's written it somewhere that a lady asked him to recommend a version of the Bhagavad-gītā. So at that time, like Dr. Mishra's students were being taught the Mayavadi philosophy from him, right? And there's even a lady that was going to do some editing of his manuscript, but when she understood that Prabhupada's philosophy was not accepting, the impersonalistic view of Krishna, she wouldn't continue to edit. And of course, the manuscript was also stolen. That's another thing that happened in that winter. Prabhupada's manuscript that he was working on the Bhagavad-gītā was stolen when he was staying in that loft, So his tape recorder was stolen, his Bhagavad-gītā manuscript. Unbelievable.
He had a big reel-to-reel tape recorder.
Yes, reel-to-reel. That's all they had in those days. They didn't have the compact ones yet. Yeah. So, but he was mentioning that a lady had asked him to recommend a version of the Bhagavad-gītā, because as Prabhupada said, there were already various Bhagavad-gītās in bookshops, but all of them were mostly Mayavad, and he said, I couldn't recommend any version. Actually, the version that Prabhupada was using, because he didn't have he didn't have his own Bhagavad-gītā. So the version that he was using when he first came to America was the Ramakrishna Mission version, who had published, or maybe it was Gita Press, I forget actually. Gita Press, it could be. But it still had some Mayavadi interpretation in it. Of course, he wouldn't, when he was reading from there, he would avoid that interpretation. But that's where it comes to, the purport that Srila Prabhupada writes at the very end. I think it's at the very end, the Padmanabha Madbhakto verse, right? It's mentioned in 2 places. So, yes. So for that verse, in the 18th chapter, just before Sarvadharman Parityaja, for that verse, Srila Prabhupada is writing, always think of me, become my devotee, worship me, and offer your homage unto me. Thus you will come to me without fail. I promise you this, because you are my very dear friend. So then Prabhupada writes in his purport, the most confidential part of knowledge is that one should become a pure devotee of Krishna and always think of him and act for him. One should not become an official meditator. Life should be so molded that one will always have the chance to think of Krishna. One should always act in such a way that all his daily activities are in connection with Krishna. He should arrange his life in such a way that throughout the 24 hours he cannot but think of Krishna. And the Lord's promise is that anyone who is in such pure Krishna consciousness in the association of Krishna face to face. Sorry, I skipped a line. And the Lord's promise is that anyone who is in such pure Krishna consciousness will certainly return to the abode of Krishna, where he will be engaged in the association of Krishna face to face. This most confidential part of knowledge is spoken to Arjuna because he is the dear friend of Krishna. Everyone who follows the path of Arjuna can become a dear friend to Krishna and obtain the same perfection as Arjuna. These words stress, Manmana Bhava Madbhakto, these words stress that one should concentrate his mind upon Krishna, the very form, with two hands carrying a flute, the bluish boy with a beautiful face and peacock feathers in his hair. There are descriptions of Krishna found in the Brahma Samhita and other literatures. One should fix his mind on this original form of Godhead, Krishna. He should not even divert his attention to other forms of the Lord. The Lord has multi-forms, as Vishnu, Narayan, Ram, Varaha, etc. But a devotee should concentrate his mind on the form that was present before Arjuna. Concentration of the mind on the form of Krishna constitutes the most confidential part of knowledge. And this is disclosed to Arjuna because Arjuna is the most dear friend of Krishna. So, how beautiful are Prabhupada's purports, huh? So incredible. By just my own little experience of this reading of the Gita Jayanti, the whole Bhagavad-gītā, it's very, very enlivening because it's so many years ago, as I said the other night, that I came in touch with the Bhagavad-gītā. And Bhagavad-gītā is what made the whole foundation for my and all of our, especially the older devotees of the Krishna consciousness movement. The Bhagavad-gītā was the main thing. And we would also go out and preach it. I remember when we were in the Detroit temple, at one point, I remember Bhagavan was the temple president there, and we all kind of, in the temple, the devotees said, we should now start studying and memorizing different important verses from the Bhagavad-gītā. And everyone started to do that. We would write it down on an index card, and then we would repeat it to ourselves and try to learn it. And then part of that learning process was to go out onto the streets when you're distributing the books, and you're directly talking with the people to actually quote the verse. Krishna says in the Bhagavad-gītā, such and such. The embodied soul continually passes from this body, in this body, from boyhood to youth to old age. But the self-realized soul is not bewildered by such a change. My dear sir, my dear madam, we would like to offer you this book. It has so much interesting information in it that will help you to become happy in life. Your life will become perfect. But nobody is a better, I hate to use the word salesman, but yes, not a bad word.
Okay.
Srila Prabhupada was the best salesman, I think, in this day of Brahma, of the Bhagavad-gītā, right? And when you see what he wrote in his preface, absolutely bold and not deviating at all from the main deep meanings of the Bhagavad-gītā. And that is found all throughout his purports. So, it wasn't until many years later that our Gurudevs, Srimad Bhagavad-gītā came out by Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj. I remember he told me that I want you to help to edit the Gita. So at that time we were in Vrindavan and the Gita was being edited, and Sridandi Maharaj, who wasn't a sannyasi, we weren't sannyasis yet at that time, but he was editing, and one of the disciples of Gurudev, Hari Priya, had done the translation from Hindi to English. So when Srila Gurudev's Bhagavad-gītā came out, it was a unique thing, because it's the only other authorized Guru Parampara Bhagavad-gītā that existed in the English language, right, up to that time, And so timely it actually was, because, Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavad-gītā is giving a certain perspective from Srila Baladev Vijayabhushan, Gaudiya Vedanta Acharya, Baladev Vijayabhushan, because Srila Prabhupada was focusing on the philosophical. I was also reading in the introduction of Gurudev's Bhagavad-gītā, in the preface actually, Srila Bhaktivedanta Vaman Goswami Maharaj, and he was explaining this so clearly. What is the difference between Srila Baladev Vijayabhushan Prabhu's presentation of the Gita, his commentary, and Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur? So Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's is the main presentation of Gurudev's, right? And he was explaining that the philosophical content of Achintya Bhed Abhed Tattva Acharya, Baladev Vijayabhushan, was presented for firm philosophical position. And that's what was needed at that time. Yeah. It's always needed, actually. The Bhagavad-gītā, as it is still the main selling Bhagavad-gītā worldwide, and will always be, probably. Yeah. In all and it's also been translated in all major languages, and hundreds of millions of copies sold in all languages. German, French, Spanish, everything. All the major languages. Russian, Chinese even.
Universities and
and in the early period of like 1973 was when they started the library party. And not only the Gita, but Prabhupada's Bhagavatam, they were selling to universities everywhere, even in the Soviet Union, going across and selling, So, but Srila Gurudev wanted to present, because there was no presentation in the Hindi language up to that point and that's the main language of India. So that was absent, a Hindi presentation of Bhagavad-gītā with the authorized commentary of the Gaudiya Vaishnava Acharyas, right? That was not yet available in Hindi language. It was available in Bengali. Actually, Srila Bhakti Sri Rup Siddhanti Maharaj, he presented a very authorized version of the Bhagavad-gītā in Bengali with, I think there was both Baladev Vijayabhushan and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Srila Vaman Maharaj was explaining that. But Srila Gurudev was so concerned that in the Hindi language, there was no official version. So he wrote it in Hindi for the whole of India, for the whole national language of India. It was also presented in one version, Srila Vaman Maharaj wrote, that without purports, they actually printed a small, pocket-sized version, just the verses in Hindi.
And what's the distribution of that?
Don't know. You mean the quantity?
Yeah, like any idea how well distributed it is?
No, I don't know.
At least something to look into.
Well, one of the things is that in ISKCON, all of Srila Prabhupada's books were translated into Bengali from the English. And then They were also translated into Hindi. And then they were also translated into Oriya by Srila Gaura Govinda Maharaj. He worked on all of Prabhupada's books. But because ISKCON society was such an active, going to the public and going into the streets, and it's like the nature of the Western preaching mission was transferred over into India, even in the early 70s, and they began to distribute. But especially by the mid-70s, they started having traveling Sankirtan vans and vehicles in India. And to this day, ISKCON is very big with book distribution. They have fantastic vehicles, and they set up right in the middle of the streets of Delhi or Calcutta or anywhere, But in the Gaudiya Math, there hadn't been so much focus on mass distribution, So anyway, Gurudev wrote in the Hindi language and translated it over from the Bengali and added his own commentary. First of all, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's own commentary, exact. And then he wrote his own commentary after that, which was presenting actually Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's version, because he was one of the three acharyas who Srila Vaman Raj mentioned, whose version of the Bhagavad-gītā, authorized version in the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, were these three personalities, Baladev Vidyabhushan, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, and Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur of the modern day. So Gurudev's Bhagavad-gītā is so enriched with these commentaries. He gave directly the whole commentary of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur.
So he summarized Bhaktivinoda Thakur's.
And he summarized
in
it
his commentary.
in his commentary, and then he added so much to that also. So it's so wonderful, coming from the background of Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavad-gītā, which is so powerful and authentic and, gives so much shraddha, so good for your shraddha. And then coming to Srila Gurudev's, the tone of Srila Gurudev's Bhagavad-gītā is really set for a certain audience who are familiar with the Bhagavad-gītā already. Yeah. And like I said the other day, it's like the perfect sequel to Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavad-gītā as
I
it
don't
is.
think it's really meant so much for
No.
mass distribution.
No, it wasn't written with that. None of Gurudev's books are written with that intention.
Yeah, although they like to say that we can mass distribute them.
Well, we can, because we could mass distribute even the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Antya Leela, and all those books. Prabhupada, was asked, should we distribute? Yes, all the books.
Yeah.
So Gurudev also said the same, and there's no harm, because even if they read one line, Prabhupada wrote that famous letter, even if they read one line, even if they read one word, it can completely change their life, There's a verse like that. You say that in the Mangalacharam, don't you?
There's many meanings.
Yeah.
Each sloka, each syllable, every word,
Right.
many meanings.
Many meanings. So anyway, because a few days before the festival, I started looking at the introduction and the preface in each of these two versions, and it was so enriching. And I began to develop a strong desire to actually read myself in my own personal study the whole Bhagavad-gītā as it is, along with Srila Gurudev's Bhagavad-gītā, side by side, just like Radhakanta Prabhu is doing with the Bhagavatam. So it's kind of like that. Yeah. And I actually put it off for so many years. Because years ago I was intending to do that, but I didn't really get around to it. We've got so many incredible literatures, and
So you've read Gurudev's Gita, but not side by side?
Not side by side and compared, yeah.
So you feel like it deepens Prabhupada's
Oh,
the
absolutely.
basic thing in it.
Yeah, I mean, Srila Prabhupada has to stay within a certain context for his audience, you see. And what he's writing, the deep meditation, like he said, these are his, what did he call it? His something ecstasies, emotional ecstasies, which means his bhavs.
Yeah.
He said, my purports are my emotional ecstasies. And you can really feel that in Prabhupada's Gita.
Yeah.
And he's continuously aware and conscious and writing it directed toward an audience who have never read the Bhagavad-gītā before, right? But Gurudev's, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's, is revealing an inner mood, the inner intention. What is it called again? Sar Artha Varshani. Sar Artha Varshani. So the essence from the viewpoint of rasa, this is what Srila Vaman Maharaj said, is the speciality of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's, because he's revealing what Krishna feels and what Krishna is thinking. Give an example. The verse that we just read, Manmana Bhavamad Bhakto. So, in the purport of Gurudev's Gita, of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he's explaining there that Krishna, when he was telling this verse to Arjuna, right, and he's saying, Manmana Bhavamad Bhakto, always think of me, become my devotee, worship me, offer your namaskar to me. Then he says, Mam eva ishyasi, Mam eva ishyasi, you will come to me. Satyam te. Satyam te means, like we say in English, I'm telling you the truth, right? Satyam te means that. Arjuna, I'm telling you the truth. I would never cheat you. Why? Because pratijane priyosime. Pratijane means I promise you. I promise you that I would never cheat you. And Krishna is standing there, as he says in the purport, with his hand on his heart when he tells this to Arjuna. And then, in the remaining verses after this, of the final chapter, 18, then Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is explaining when he asks Arjuna, Arjun, have you fully understood this? Let me see where that verse is.
Now you should decide.
Maybe it's before that.
Decide what you want to do.
Yeah. Oh yeah, here, okay, here it is. O conqueror of wealth, Arjuna, have you heard this attentively with your mind? And are your illusions and ignorance now dispelled? So when Krishna asked him that question, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is saying that Krishna was asking Arjuna to see if Arjuna had received it to the fullest extent and understood everything.
Does he have any further doubts?
Right.
Questions?
And he says, if Arjuna had expressed any doubt, Krishna would have immediately told him the entire Bhagavad-gītā again, right there on the spot. Krishna was prepared to do that. But then Arjuna says, Nashto moha smritir labdha tvat prasadan mayachyuta stitosmi gata sandeha karishye vachanam tava. Karishye vachanam tava. We've heard that. Because it means, I am now prepared. Karishye, I shall execute. Vachanam tava, your order. So he said, my dear Krishna, O infallible one, my illusion is now gone. I have regained my memory by your mercy, and I am now firm and free from doubt, and am prepared to act according to your instructions. So beautiful.
Maharaj, what's about Bhagavad-gītā version from Bhakti-Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj? I have it, I think it's called like Hidden Treasure.
Yeah, Hidden Treasure of the Sweet Absolute.
Right. Didn't that come before Gurudev's Bhagavad-gītā? And
Yes.
it's not so highly regarded perhaps because it doesn't have a purports, commentaries, it's mostly just translations, or what's about that?
Well, I wouldn't use the term not highly regarded. It's very highly regarded, but Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj's version of the Gita, as you just said, he did not give many purports at all. He focused mainly on like the 4 nutshell verses and a couple of other verses. But within the translations, he has included some depth of meaning rather than a separate purport. I don't know what was his intention, or I've never heard him explaining in that way.
What year did he publish that?
Well, around 1984, in Germany, was this Bhakti, what's his name, Ananda Sagara. He, the sannyasi, and also this other one who later became Rishikesh Maharaj, Dayadhar Gauranga.
Yeah.
They were printing it and publishing it exactly at that time. It was at the end of 1984, because I was there in that temple in London, and they were going back and forth from Germany. And so yeah, I mean, it came out long time before our Gurudev's, because Gurudev's Gita, when did Gurudev's Gita come out again? I think it was 97 perhaps.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I haven't read Srila Gurudev's version, and I'm still reading Prabhupada's version, but I'm mostly through it and have basically finished the understanding, conception of it through you and the last 2 Gita Jayantis. I got a pretty good idea, but I have never heard of Arjuna's realizations in terms of, like, okay, so he's shown the universal form.
Mm.
In that, you can call it a psychedelic vision, or some sort of, like, it's like a full manifestation of full realization, seeing Krishna's every form, and it was overwhelming to him. But in that revelation, was he ever shown Krishna, like, say Uddhava was sent to Vrindavan to see Krishna's sweetness pastime, like to experience like his true moods of Braj Bhakti. Was Arjuna revealed that form in this realization as well? Or
what we have to understand is that the form of Krishna, who's speaking on the battlefield, is not Braj Krishna.
Yeah.
It's his expansion as Vasudev Krishna, of course.
But it looks just like
Yeah.
Braj Krishna.
But there's no flute, there's no peacock feather and so forth. Huh?
But that's the root of the question. He revealed that to Uddhava in Dwarka, correctly?
Yeah.
Correct, right?
Yeah.
So did he ever reveal that to Arjuna in this moment?
You're talking about the Vraj Krishna form?
Well,
No.
Did he reveal that, in that form, in other words, he's seen the universal form. Is that form included? No.
He did. See, you can see it directly in the verses of the universal form. You can read it right there. That after revealing the universal form, which had a certain effect on Arjuna, as it would on any jiva,
Yeah.
completely, like practically fearful, because you're seeing all this power, and you're seeing the infinite, who has revealed his universal form in one place. This is the entire universe brought into this form called the Virata Rupa, in one place. That's what Krishna did for Arjuna, because Arjuna requested, I want to see that form in which you, as you've just told in the previous chapters, how you've entered into the entire universe. How did you do this? I want to see that form. So then Krishna told you, I will show it to you, but you cannot see it with your present eyes. Therefore I give you divine eyes. Divya chakshusha. I give you divine eyes through which you can see this. So then Arjuna witnessed the whole universal form, and Krishna is describing, Arjuna himself is also describing what he's seeing. And then Arjuna asks at one point, he said, who are you? Who are you? Yes. Because he's seen millions of divine forms, brilliant, and teeth and mouths and eyes and extended. You can see the artistic version of it, but that really can't do justice at all.
We have to have divine eyes.
And so that's where the question comes from. Did he reveal who he really is?
Well, then he told Arjuna. Do you remember what he told to Arjuna when Arjuna asked that question to him?
Who are you?
Then he said, Time I am. Destroyer of all the worlds. And I have come to engage you and all the soldiers on this battlefield. So anyway, then Arjuna began to offer his prayers with fear, shaking. So this was not the usual temperament, obviously, that Arjuna, what is his eternal relationship with Krishna? It's friendly relation, yes. Very, very intimate relationship with Krishna in that mood. But when he saw this manifestation, now he was shaking in fear. And he also, Aishwarya came and overwhelmed him. And then he offered so many prayers to Krishna. And he also expressed to Krishna that I have offended you by calling you my friend, by sitting in an intimate way, eating with you, talking and relaxing together like this. So after that, then Krishna told him, now I will reveal my four-armed form, which he revealed to him. And then Arjuna began to calm down. And then finally he says, now my devotee, now witness this form which is so dear to you with two arms. But he didn't reveal his Tribhanga Lalita form, threefold bending form with flute and all of that. No, that was not done there on the battlefield.
Because that wasn't Arjuna's relationship.
Right. Yes.
But it really wasn't Uddhava's relationship either.
No, but Uddhava is in a higher rank, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
Because Arjuna and the Pandavas are prema para bhaktas. They're in the fourth level. But Uddhava is prem atura. And his relationship was far more intimate even, in so many different ways. And he was Krishna's personal associate who needed to experience and see what is the gopis praying, what is the Brijvasis praying. So Krishna sent him there. Gurudev would often tell that he sent him to the university of the gopis. Right?
But did he send him there to merely broadcast the glories of the gopis, or did he send him there so that he could transform his relationship somehow with Krishna? Because that's not his mood, right? Mood.
Well, we know that one of the main reasons, probably the main reason why Krishna sent him there was because Krishna himself had no one to confide in, no one to talk with, no one to express his heart, how his heart is breaking in separation from the gopis and the Brajavasis.
And he wanted to send a message.
And he wanted, he wanted to also send a message, of course, you know. I mean, he accomplished many things by doing the one thing of sending Uddhava there, but we know that that's one of the main things that he wanted to accomplish, was that Uddhava would actually understand. And then Krishna can speak with him. Uddhava would witness it himself, right? And of course, Krishna knew that Uddhava would not be able to stay there. Like Gurudev says, he failed. Otherwise, he would have stayed there, right? So, in this case...
But he's also praying now to be a Brajavasi. From that
but
experience, he's desiring that.
To live there in Braj and to get the dust particles, that's what he's praying for. As a plant or a bush, that's what he's praying for. But he's not praying anywhere that I can enter into Gopi Bhav. He's praying for the dust from their lotus feet. Why? Because they are the topmost. There is no one to compare anywhere. And he himself is the most intimate because Krishna told that in his verse about Uddhava, where he said, no one is as dear to me, even Lakshmi, even Sankarshan, my brother, Balaram, even my very own self, Uddhava. No one is as dear to me as you.
So Uddhava plays like the divine witness to everything.
Yeah, and he's also expressing that at the end of the whole time. It was like 2 months that he stayed there in Braj with the gopis. And he helped them to console them, and in so many ways. It was a seva that he was performing. But his relationship with Krishna did not change. His intimate friendship with Krishna was still exactly the same when he came back. But now, as a friend, he can, he knows, he understands, and he can comfort Krishna. Krishna can actually express how much separation he's feeling, and Uddhava can comfort Krishna, you know. So, but Arjuna, see, it's like, even in Prabhupada's purport, he's explaining that in the universal form chapter, Prabhupada's explaining that actually there was no need for Arjuna to see the universal form. There was no need for him. There's no need for any devotee to see the universal form of Krishna. He explained that in his purport in the beginning of that chapter. And he said the main reason that Arjuna requested Krishna to show the universal form was so that in the future, any persons who would try to proclaim that they are Bhagavan, that they're the Supreme and all of that, they would have to prove it by exhibiting their universal form. So, in this way, Arjuna requested, but also Arjuna, he was affected by that vision of the universal form. And he became full of Aishwarya mood, right? But then Prabhupada is writing in the purport that Mother Yashoda also saw in Krishna's mouth the whole universe, and it was very mesmerizing, and she was seeing everything there. She even saw herself looking into Krishna's mouth, inside of his mouth, right? But there is never, and not for any Brijvasi whatsoever, has ever been affected by Aishwarya mood, or believing actually, or their relationship with Krishna being affected by the opulence and the Aishwarya. No Brijvasis.
But after Govardhan Lila, then they came to Nanda Maharaj.
they're only expressing some like curiosity and doubt, you know, but they're not believing that Krishna's God. Because as soon as Nanda Maharaj tells them, what? You're saying that my boy is Narayan, is Bhagavan? Oh, let me tell you, I know this boy better than any of you. I've known him since he was born. And then he starts mentioning all the different ways that Krishna behaves. For example, if he doesn't get his makan and mishri, he throws himself on the ground and starts kicking his arms and legs and crying. Is this the symptom of the Supreme Personality of Godhead? So in this way, he mentions so many things, and then all the cowherd men, they're all listening, and then they all agree. Yeah, certainly. But then, Nanda Maharaj says, but even if he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he's my son, and I'm going to correct him and punish him if he's doing wrong, so that when he grows up, he won't be a bad person. Like that. Anyway, so our time is gone. Would anybody like to express anything more about any appreciation or observation or what you felt?
Yes, please do this every year. Like I say.
You can do the microphone. Yeah.
Please do this every year. Thank you.
Thank Radhakanta Prabhu. He's the cause. He's the karan.
I'll say 2 words. Om Gyanati Maranasya Gyananjana Sarakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Nina Tasmai Sri Gurudev. Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavad-gītā was the main emphasis for me becoming a devotee. And I know that's the case for many, many devotees. And I also distributed Prabhupada's Gītas and was part of his book distribution Sankirtan Army for some time. But the Gita has some kind of very incredible, special potency to change the heart of the doubting soul, conditioned soul. And I experienced that myself, that I had so much covering, so much illusion, so many desires, but by reading Gita, it went right to the core of my soul, right to the core of my existence, of my faith in God, my inner awareness of what is right and wrong on a deep, very deep level, and what I should be doing. It just brought all those things to the surface and transformed me, to surrender and become a devotee. So I gave up reading Gita for many years and read other books, but I've taken up the practice again now 2-3 years, every day, reading Gita. And my wife and I have gone through many times Prabhupada's and Gurudev's Gita. And what it does for me at this point in my devotional consciousness in life is it brings me right in front of Krishna. Because after working all day and I come home, I've got a lot of things in my mind, but chanting that chapter of Bhagavad-gītā, immediately I feel the presence of Krishna. And his Shakti, his mercy, and his beauty, and everything that we appreciate about Krishna that we've heard about. So I look at it differently than I did when I was much a younger devotee, where I felt Krishna was the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he's teaching me how to surrender. Now I see this very beautiful manifestation of Brajendranandan teaching to Arjuna, teaching to the whole world, these principles which are so important for our life to keep our devotional service on track, and especially for preaching. Because I find that understanding the principles in Gita and being able to explain them and quote some shlokas from Gita for authorization, especially the Sanskrit has so much potency, that it's very powerful for preaching. And if we don't utilize that, then we lose some efficacy and some power in being able to be an instrument for Krishna to help, change people who are too much absorbed in material attachment. So I love Gita. I mean, it has its perspective for me. I don't become totally absorbed in it, but I definitely respect it, chant it every day, and try to learn shlokas. In Prabhupada's purports in Srimad Bhagavatam and Chaitanya Charitamrita, he quotes Gita so often.
Yeah.
Very Prabhupada loved, and there's certain shlokas again and again he quotes. So you just automatically learn it when you're reading the purports of Srimad Bhagavatam. And then there's some, I'm starting to write a paper of all these shlokas I want to learn to memory from Gita. And I thought, okay, there'll be 1 or 2 shlokas maybe in each chapter. Won't be that many, maybe 30 shlokas. I started writing. I became so inspired. It's not 1 or 2 shlokas, it's so many important shlokas for preaching and for explaining our philosophy. So I got a big project ahead of me to finish cataloging all the shlokas and then making a systematic effort to learn it.
Did you go through all 18 chapters yet?
Yeah, I went through all 18. I've got them all listed.
What's the number? How many so far?
Oh, it's a lot. Actually, I'm not even sure I got through all 18 chapters. It's pretty extensive. I didn't think there'd be that many. But Gita is very relishable to remember, to chant. And especially I find that when I travel to foreign countries, in Asia or China or Philippines, Bali, and I'm speaking to an audience that is different than the American audience, that Gita has such power of conviction to, it just starts to come automatically. I remember the shlokas and they just have a potency.
What's your favorite one?
My favorite one? Actually, I haven't memorized the Sanskrit, but I really like the one that I quoted the other day about austerity of speech, because I find that to be very helpful and instructive in how to speak Harikatha and also just how to relate with people, especially devotees. Austerity of speech consists of speaking truthfully, avoiding speech which offends, speaking in a beneficial way, and to regularly chant, to regularly quote the Vedic literatures. So, yeah, I mean, there's so many beautiful verses, but I am happy that this Gita Jayanti comes once a year, and it kind of is an impetus for us to delve into the Gita in a very deep way. And I know if I had stayed in the Bay Area, I probably would have just done it at home with my wife. We still would have done it, but it's so much more relishable with the assembly of devotees here, and then everything else that goes along with it, the kirtan, so. Yeah.
Festival.
I'm happy to come every year if we continue to do it.
Gurudev is pleased. I think that's maybe one of the things you possibly feel is, he's pleased by you coming here and doing this and activating this, for sure. Prabhupada, I can feel that.
But it was going on anyways, right?
Not
Gita Jayanti, weren't they chanting here before last year?
I've personally never been here
Darpa had been here.
for Gita Jayanti.
I don't think we've done
It wasn't like this.
Gita.
Yeah, only last year you started.
That was the first time?
That's the first time I ever did it in my life.
I thought they just did the English or just the Sanskrit previously.
Yeah,
They did the whole Gita.
I don't remember totally.
Okay.
But yeah.
So this is very comprehensive.
It's
Everyone
comprehensive,
remembers. Yeah,
And you made it into a 3-day festival on top of it, you know?
yeah.
So,
It's hard to come up to New Braj for one day. It's pretty hard.
yeah, why only one day?
Right.
So far you have to travel,
Yeah.
you know.
I'd like to ask, I know Maharaj, you and I, we could just, do this all day, no problem, I love it. But I'd like to ask the other devotees here, what, if they have any suggestions or critique and what their, feelings are about the program and how they liked it, we need to change it, and what they got out of it. Anyone?
So,
Give their feedback.
so I was a little bit comparing last year's with this year, and last year it took quite a bit longer. We were still like at 10 p.m. something when we finished.
Yeah.
And then I thought this year I liked the Sanskrit went pretty quick. Maharaj also went faster. And why not? Because we really don't know yet the Sanskrit verses. It's Kali Yuga, the memory is not so good. And then it had some more time to verses, but it went quick. Yep. So I thought that was a little helpful.
Not to be so long, okay?
Yes. Not so taxing. And
That's because we cut out the Gita Mahatmya.
yeah,
Yeah,
those stories.
Yeah, after each chapter we were reading for like 10 minutes or something.
And like you mentioned to me actually, Radha, yourself yesterday, after the reading of Gita, it could have been something shorter, those verses.
At the end,
Yeah,
glorification, yeah.
Govinda was reading.
Yeah.
I think devotees started falling asleep.
Yeah, it was too long. I didn't think it would take that long.
It was what, like 80 something verses?
Yeah,
right?
but we just did the 18th chapter.
Right.
That went pretty fast, so I thought it was gonna be like that, but it seemed to take longer. There's only 10 more slokas.
Yeah.
18th chapter. We can look for some other, I think the point about glorifying the Gita at the end is very important. But we can find something, either do excerpts of that or do something a little
Yeah, I
shorter.
think.
Yeah.
You can do excerpts.
Excerpts, important.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because like, attaining the planet of the moon and all that, maybe that's not so important. It's nice to hear, but.
So I think cutting some time is my somewhat ridiculous opinion, but I thought that worked.
Yeah, this
How
year.
did you, can I ask you, what, how did you feel afterwards? What kind of effect did it have on you that day or today, or how has it affected you? Consciousness or inspired you in any way?
It's quite personal, right? After, especially like you say, there were certain verses and chapters